Welcome to One Word a Day. I'm Sophia, piloting into the universe of Chinese. Let's continue exploring ocean/industrial age concepts that first translated by Japanese scholars and Chinese conveniently inherit those. Okay, 原则 is today's concept. And we can see simplified traditional almost looks the same, except this portion that we use bei. We simplified the bei with just two strokes versus this one. You have to draw out with more strokes. But this is closer to the 2000 years ago's rendering. You can see almost, but this 2000, the seal script language, rendering was way more closer to the origin. And we're talking about origin today. How Chinese express origin. So first off, the foundational world building principle of Chinese language, so language as a picture, was in a way in a world building in this 2D frame, right? So there were some kind of like the world we live in. We know gravity is one of the principles that we're going to talk about today that we live off. That's the condition. That's the configuration. We have some constants on this planet Earth that we live with. So same way, Chinese as a culture, even if it only this language as 2D frame culturally, that reflects how the language and the culture reflect their foundational thinking. So left facing is one that foundational thinking that I figured out way back after repeating this and then connecting dots. So basically, Chinese regard the front going forward as leftward facing versus English. When we draw a number line, a timeline, the arrow by default just go to the right. That we don't even think about. It's this foundation, like everybody work from the same coordinate. The way we orient is this means bigger number, right? Toward the right, it means bigger number. And the vertical line means higher, right? So Chinese, on the other hand, I'm glad that we have this diversity on planet Earth still. Like this culture is still thinking the other direction. There's no right and wrong. This is wholly arbitrary. Just like planet Earth, there's no north and south or top and down. The orientation is human defined. Okay, the top left corner here, facing toward the left, right, means high ground. Bottom left corner means low ground. We always see the top and the bottom on the left side. Don't ever on the right side. That's because the orientation, that's like by default, we're facing toward the left. So here we have a high ground. And then this portion, the middle part, you can see it's almost like a shell opening with something going out. So something going out, meaning coming from high ground. So what come from high ground? Well, in another character, we add the water symbol on the left side. That means the origin of water. But to me, this frame already shows you the water origin, because waters that we're seeing, the rivers, even the oceans, right? It's the whole circulation of the earth. And that came from the high ground, high mountains, and snow melt coming down. That we all learn in school, right? And Chinese back then, even without without a contemporary education, as I guess we were able to have way more advanced earth science. Even back then, language creators used that principle of something coming from the high ground, and that set as the origin. And we know what come from high ground is water. Water flow from high to low ground, right? So that's a Chinese way. Use this water source as the origin concept. Okay, ru. What is ru? Ru made of. The left side is a vessel, the metal vessel in ancient times that you probably have seen in some of the museums. That's 2,000-3,000 years ago. People back then invented this way of casting bronze iron, cast bronze into such vessels. And then by casting it, they were able to have message molded onto this vessel. And those, because this is a kind of I guess the high technology back then, what do you think are messages molded onto such vessel, which last a long time, even like 3,000 years later, archaeologists dig this out, put it in a museum, and then we can, 3,000 years later, can still see the wisdom, the messages on those vessels. And this knife simply means carving, but I guess because the technology came from the bronze vessel, and I'm guessing it's made from this mold making, that you have this hot melted metal in the mold that can come out in whatever shape fitting the mold, right? And so this carving is really like extra. Maybe that carving, this knife means carving, was done to the mold, that it has to be, for the message to be able to pass down, humans have to carve onto some surface. If not directly on the vessel, it got to be onto the mold to carve the message. And imagine how hard it is, because it's the opposite of what we see. The character have to be flipped. Anyhow, that's a whole craftsmanship and I guess industry back then. Whoever learned to do this were given such expensive way of preserving message by who? The rulers, most likely, because such Diong is the Chinese word that's symbolized by this. It kind of look like this. Most often it's a tripod, because tripod is the minimum or maximum number of feet a vessel can sit on without wobbling. 3 is determining a surface, right? But then here on the 2D frame, we cannot draw 3 legs there. So only the 2 facing you, the viewer of this language, can be seen. But then here, the top is simply the out shape of the vessel, and 2 horizontal lines is the simplification of the messages or patterns carved onto, not carved, but molded onto those vessels. And when we have such vessels in ancient times, most often it's because it's costly and it's high tech, it was used by the ruler of the country, or I guess super rich of the country, to be able to preserve whatever message they want onto those vessels. And so that way of preserving message, here the knife, indicating the mold carving, and the vessel itself, this way of preserving message then implies it's important message, and it's the rule from the ruler. So that's a long-winded way to explain why 则 means rule, means from the top leader who set the rules, who set the game plan for the people under his rule. So 原则, the origin rule, is the translation of principle. And I'm thinking this origin rule almost by the translation itself, almost equivalent to quote unquote first principles, because it goes to the origin. Because probably the rule setting also got a hierarchy. The foundational ones, the non-changing, the closer to the ground truths, things like gravity, those would be the first principles. And then the third were derived from this foundational principle. And so Chinese 原则 already shows this first principle in there. And I guess 80-20, this Pareto principle is a very well-known principles that somebody discovered and can be applied to business situations a lot. There we go. 原则. Thank you for your time. See you another day.